If you have ever heard someone say that Taurus is slow, stubborn, so attached to safety that change feels uncomfortable, you might have nodded along. Maybe you have even thought that about yourself, or about a Taurus somewhere in your life. And then, there comes a moment that feels a little strange. Two people, both Taurus, both valuing stability, both honoring long-lasting values. Yet the way they live, the way they love, the way they respond to life is completely different. Some Taurus stay silent for a long time before making a decision. Others move faster than anyone expects. Some are so resilient that nothing seems to shake them. And yet, there are Taurus who are gentle, sensitive, deeply rooted in their emotional world. And at some point, you start wondering if they share the same zodiac sign. Why are they so different? Maybe Taurus is not as simple as the labels the world likes to place on them. Inside every Taurus, there is a private universe, shaped by lived experiences, by environment, by old wounds that once left a mark, and by subtle layers of energy they may not even have words for yet. Astrology does not say that someone must be this way or that way. It is more like a faded map, quietly pointing to different energy currents. For Taurus, those currents are not the same for everyone at birth. Some carry the energy of endurance and quiet survival. Some carry deep emotional depth. Others carry a powerful need for attachment, for security, for something that feels steady and lasting. They are all Taurus. But each one enters life through a different doorway. That may be why some Taurus are hard to change. Not because they are stubborn, but because they learned to cling to stability in order to survive. And there are Taurus who are more vulnerable than they appear, because they experience life through the heart more than through logic. And there are Taurus who love deeply, and love for a very long time, because to them, connection is not a habit, it is a silent commitment. If you are Taurus, you may have wondered why you don't quite match the version people often talk about. And if that difference ever made you feel out of place, try allowing yourself to pause for a moment. Not to compare, not to search for right or wrong, just to listen to yourself, because maybe that difference is not a flaw. Maybe it is simply how life shaped you from very specific materials. The things you hold tightly, the things you are afraid to lose, the things that make you feel safe, and the things that quietly unsettle you, but are hard to put into words. When we look at Taurus this way, we no longer see a rigid mold. We see people learning how to stand firm in a constantly shifting world. We see hearts trying to build something lasting, even when it costs them silent exhaustion. And maybe, what truly matters is not whether Taurus are alike or different. What matters is that every Taurus, in their own way, is trying to live in alignment with the values they believe are safe, real, and worth protecting. When we understand that, it becomes easier to be gentle with ourselves, and easier to be compassionate toward the Taurus in our lives. If you are listening to these words right now, don't take them as an explanation. Take them as an invitation. An invitation to look inward with less judgment. An invitation to accept that being different does not make you less. It only means you are a very specific version of Taurus, walking your own path, at a pace that feels safest to your heart. And sometimes, just understanding that alone can feel like a deep, quiet comfort. Because when you allow yourself to look a little deeper, you begin to see that Taurus is not made of a single flat layer, like people often assume. Beneath that calm exterior, there are very different currents quietly moving. Layers of energy that are not loud, not dramatic, yet deeply shape how a Taurus experiences life, how they love, and how they respond when sudden change arrives without warning. Some Taurus live like a massive stone, placing themselves in the middle of life and letting time slowly wear against them. They are used to standing firm, used to enduring, used to carrying things without complaint. But there are also Taurus who are more like soft earth, absorbing every emotion around them, holding it inside for a long time, sometimes so long they forget how much has gone unspoken. And then there are Taurus who are always drawn toward connection. toward safety, toward a place or a person they can quietly call their own, even when that attachment makes the fear of loss feel heavier. These differences are not random. They are like layers of sediment, formed very early on, when each Taurus entered the world with a rhythm entirely their own. Some arrived carrying the energy of steadiness from the start. Some came with sensitivity, easily moved by the smallest things. Others carried a strong need to anchor themselves, to put down roots, to know they would not drift away in the constant movement of life. Seen this way, what we often call the darker side does not appear as something frightening. It shows up as a sign that Taurus is trying to protect themselves. Rigidity can simply be fear of losing control. Long silence can mean they have not yet found a safe place to speak, and holding tightly to familiar people or situations can be a way of preserving stability in a world that feels increasingly unpredictable. Maybe Taurus are not all the same because each one is learning a different lesson along the same journey. Some are learning how to let go. Some are learning how to speak up. Some are learning how to trust that they can still be safe even when everything changes. These layers of energy do not exist separately. They overlap. They weave into one another, creating a person who is both strong and fragile, both grounded and deeply internal. And when Taurus begins to recognize this, they can become gentler with themselves, no longer blaming themselves for not fitting the so-called standard image of Taurus, no longer forcing themselves into a rigid mold they never truly belonged in. Instead, there is simple acceptance. Acceptance that inside them are many layers of feeling, many ways of reacting, all trying to do one quiet thing to survive, to feel safe, and to keep moving forward. Understanding these layers may not suddenly make life easier, but it can make Taurus feel less alone when facing themselves. And sometimes, just knowing that what you feel is not random, not weakness, but something deeply human within Taurus can be enough to let the heart soften a little during long days when so much remains unspoken. And then, when you listen more closely to the rhythm beating inside you, you may begin to recognize a very familiar kind of Taurus. The Taurus who has been through many challenges without ever needing to take credit. They are not loud about what they endure. They are used to standing firm, used to carrying things on their own, used to moving forward, even when they are deeply tired inside. That resilience once helped them survive more difficult seasons than most people realize. It is what makes others trust them, what becomes the foundation for everything they try to build over time. But right there, something else quietly begins to form. When you are used to never giving up, you can forget that you are also allowed to stop. Taurus can hold very tightly to what once felt right, what once felt safe, what once provided stability, a relationship, a job, a role, an image of who they believe they are. And they keep going, not always because they still believe, but because they no longer know how to let go. There are Taurus who stay, not because they are happy, but because they are afraid that if they release their grip, everything will collapse. They choose endurance over facing the emptiness that might come afterward. Slowly, persistence turns into rigidity. Strong will becomes a wall that doesn't just keep others out, but sometimes keeps Taurus from reaching their own true emotions. From the outside, people see a Taurus who looks steady, grounded, unshakable. But inside, there may be someone who has been holding themselves together for far too long. Tired but unsure who to tell. Discouraged but unwilling to allow weakness. They tell themselves just a little more effort and everything will be fine. And so they continue, day after day, carrying things that are already old, never fully setting them down. This does not make Taurus wrong. It simply shows that they learned how to survive through endurance. But eventually, that endurance begins to ask a quiet question. Am I staying because I still believe, or because I am afraid of change? Am I holding on because this is still alive, or because I am not ready to let it go? Maybe the lesson here is not about quitting, and not about changing everything right away. It is about learning how to tell the difference. the difference between perseverance and attachment, between loyalty to your values and being trapped in something that no longer nourishes you. Sometimes, letting go does not make Taurus weaker. It simply lightens their hands so they can hold what fits the person they have become. When Taurus allows themselves to ask that question, without rushing for an answer, just being honest within, a quiet pause appears. In that pause, they may begin to feel their body again, their breath, their emotions, and maybe, for the first time in a long while, they realize they have already tried hard enough, not to abandon everything, only to allow themselves to rest inside their own truth. And sometimes, just that alone is enough for the weight on Taurus's shoulders to begin to ease, little by little, in the familiar silence they have always known. And then, as that version of Taurus begins to gently release the weight of endurance, another shade of Taurus slowly comes into view. A Taurus who does not need to be strong all the time, who does not need to prove how steady they are, because their inner world is already full of subtle movement and quiet depth. These Taurus experience life more through feeling than through logic. They hear what others do not say. They sense the mood of a room, the smallest shift in a voice, a glance, the silence that lingers between two sentences. For them, emotion is not just a reaction, it is a language. They love deeply, they grieve deeply, and their thoughts travel far. There are nights when a Taurus lies still, doing nothing at all, yet inside, an entire stream of reflection is flowing. They revisit old moments, unspoken words, paths that might have unfolded differently. Not because they want to live in the past, but because their heart needs time to process everything it has taken in. That sensitivity is what makes Taurus gentle and understanding. They step easily into another person's perspective. They empathize quickly. They forgive easily. But that same sensitivity can pull them inward. A careless remark may stay with them far longer than intended. A small hope can quietly grow into something much larger. And when reality fails to match the image they once imagined, the disappointment arrives softly, yet settles very deep. There are Taurus who do not speak their sadness aloud, because they are unsure whether anyone would truly understand. So they manage their emotions on their own. They comfort themselves. They quietly recalibrate. But sometimes that self-reliance becomes exhausting. When life is lived too deeply inside, the outside world can start to feel distant. Reality, with its concrete demands, can feel heavy, while the heart is still somewhere else, trying to hold on to an emotion that has not yet faded. The darker side here is not that Taurus feels too much. It is that they can forget to anchor themselves in the present moment. When emotion guides every decision, it becomes easy to idealize people, relationships, or entire situations. And when things do not unfold as expected, they do not blame anyone. They simply turn inward, quietly asking themselves where they went wrong. Maybe what Taurus needs to learn is not how to feel less. Feeling is a gift. Intuition is a gift. Sensitivity is a gift. But every gift needs a steady container. Keeping both feet on the ground is not about hardening the heart, but about giving the heart a place to stand. So Taurus can feel deeply without being swept away. As Taurus slowly learns to return to the present, to the small, tangible, very real details of life, their emotions begin to feel lighter. No longer waves that pull them too far out, but gentle currents that help them understand where they are. And within that fragile balance, Taurus can continue living with a soft heart, without losing the quiet peace they need to keep moving forward. And when Taurus finally touches that fragile balance, another side slowly begins to reveal itself, gentle, yet deeply real. It is the way they attach to people, to familiar spaces, to relationships that have quietly become part of their life. For Taurus, love is not a passing feeling. Love is staying. It is building. It is thinking about tomorrow within the smallest moments of today. These Taurus do not fall in love quickly. They observe. They sense. They take their time, making sure the feelings they invest are truly worth it. Once they open their heart, they love through steady presence. They remember what others often forget. They keep their promises. They value the stability a relationship creates, not only for themselves but for the one they love. Yet that deep attachment sometimes carries a very quiet worry, the fear of losing what they have worked so hard to build. Taurus does not fear small changes. They fear the kind of change that shakes their sense of safety, and when that fear appears, love can begin to carry a tension they may not immediately recognize. Some Taurus do not control because they want to possess. They control because they want to protect. They believe that if they hold on tightly enough, if they care deeply enough, nothing will slip away. They worry more than necessary. They create invisible boundaries, not to harm, but to calm themselves. From the outside, this may look restrictive, but from the inside, it is a heart trying to keep its world from falling apart. Taurus loves sincerely. So when they sense distance, even the smallest shift, unease can arise quickly. They do not want to lose the person they chose. They do not want to start over. They do not want to face the emptiness that separation might leave behind. The darker side does not lie in their love. It lies in the moments when love is guided by fear instead of trust. When caring turns into holding too tightly, both sides can grow tired. Taurus may feel exhausted from always being on guard, and the one beside them may feel short of breath from a lack of space. Perhaps the lesson here arrives slowly and very gently. That love is not a rope binding two people together. It is more like parallel paths, where each person still has room to breathe, to grow, to become a better version of themselves. Taurus does not need to love less. They only need to learn how to love without frightening themselves. When Taurus allows themselves to believe that not everything must be controlled in order to last, love begins to feel lighter, not because it is less deep, but because it is nourished by respect and freedom. And in that connection, no longer ruled by fear of loss, Taurus may begin to realize that true love is not about holding tight so nothing disappears, but about growing together, slowly, step by step. Within the sense of safety both hearts create together, and when Taurus looks back at all of these different shades, they may begin to notice a very quiet thread connecting every experience. Whether they are the one who endures patiently, the one who lives deeply in emotion, or the one who attaches wholeheartedly to what they love, behind it all is a very human desire to feel safe, to stay standing, to know that what they build will not disappear too quickly. Maybe that is why Taurus fears loss more than they realize, not because they are weak, but because they care deeply. Once they grow used to a certain rhythm, a certain person, a certain sense of stability, even imagining change can make them hesitate. That fear is not loud. It lives quietly inside, guiding decisions in subtle ways that Taurus themselves may not always be able to name. Stubbornness, at times, is simply a way of keeping the world from falling out of balance. Held in emotion can come from not yet finding a place that feels safe enough to speak. And holding on tightly, clinging to what is familiar, can be a way of avoiding the pain of starting over, of losing something that took a very long time to build. Seen this way, the darker sides no longer look like mistakes. They look more like signals. Signs that Taurus is trying to protect something deeply precious to them. And maybe the moment things truly begin to shift is not when Taurus lets go completely, but when they become honest enough to see the fear standing quietly behind their actions. Just noticing it is enough. There is no need to fix anything right away, no need to force change. That awareness alone can create a small opening, enough for Taurus to slow their breath, enough to ask themselves whether what they are holding still nourishes them, whether the stability they are protecting truly brings peace, or simply helps them avoid facing uncertainty. In that quiet space, Taurus can begin to be gentler with themselves, no longer blaming themselves for being stubborn, no longer feeling ashamed for being sensitive, no longer worrying that they love too deeply, simply accepting that every reaction comes from one very simple desire: to feel safe in this world. And sometimes, just understanding that shared root is enough for Taurus to set down part of the weight they carry. Not to become someone else, but to continue being themselves. with a little more tenderness for a heart that has been trying for a very long time. And from that tenderness, something else begins to grow, very slowly, very gently. Not a dramatic change, not a clear turning point. It is more like the way morning light slips into a familiar room. Quiet, unannounced, yet enough to make everything a little clearer. Taurus begins to look at the parts of themselves that once felt heavy with a different gaze. No longer rushing to push them away. No longer trying to prove that they are stronger than their fear. When Taurus allows themselves to admit that they have limits, that there are things that make their heart tremble, that there are emotions they never quite learned how to name, they do not become weaker as they once feared. Instead, they become calmer, more settled, not because every worry disappears, but because they are no longer fighting themselves. There is a quiet kind of strength that emerges when Taurus stops rejecting the uncomfortable parts within. When they stop forcing themselves to always be okay, to always be solid, to always be the one everyone leans on. In that moment, healing begins in a very natural way. Not through promises, not through goals to be achieved, but through honest presence with themselves. This transformation is not loud. It shows up in the way Taurus reacts more slowly to things that once triggered tension, in the way they listen more instead of holding tightly, in the way they allow emotions to pass through without needing to keep them for so long. Little by little, they learn how to stand steady without bracing themselves. They learn how to love without controlling. They learn how to stay with the present moment without fearing what tomorrow might bring. When Taurus lives from that place of acceptance, others can feel it too. There is a sense of safety around them, something real, something grounded, not because they always have answers, but because they are calm enough to sit with someone inside uncertainty, patient enough to listen, steady enough not to be swept away by someone else's emotions, warm enough to make others feel understood. Maybe healing is not about becoming a more perfect version of yourself. For Taurus, it may simply be about returning to their natural rhythm, a place where they no longer hide their fears, no longer blame themselves for very human reactions, and in that honesty, they become a quiet anchor, not only for themselves, but for those who happen to step into their space. This transformation does not make Taurus someone entirely different. It simply allows them to live more lightly within who they already are. And sometimes, that alone is enough for life to slow down, just enough for the heart to rest, just enough for good things to find space to grow in the most natural way. And as that journey settles into a slower breath, Taurus may allow themselves to pause just a little longer, not to search for right or wrong answers, but simply to listen to how the body responds, to listen to emotions as they arrive and as they pass, to listen to the small, quiet truths that life whispers every single day. If you are a Taurus, you may not need to become someone else. You do not need to be less persistent, less emotional, or love any less deeply. Maybe the only thing needed is to understand why you respond the way you do, why there are things you hold on to for so long, why there are things that feel so hard to release, even when you are tired. Not to judge yourself, but to see that every reaction has its own reason. When that understanding arrives, very softly, Taurus begins to move more slowly, without feeling left behind. They no longer have to force themselves to be strong all the time, no longer have to brace themselves to prove their worth. They allow themselves to simply be who they are, with all the parts that once felt confusing, uncertain, or heavy with self-blame. There is a kind of peace that belongs uniquely to Taurus, one that only appears when they stop fighting their inner world, when they accept that they are both strong and tender, that they need stability and they also need to be understood, and that both can exist together without canceling each other out. That sense of peace does not come from life becoming easier. It comes from Taurus no longer abandoning themselves along the path of growing up. When they know how to pause, to check in, to feel, to adjust their pace in a way that truly fits them, the world around them seems to slow down too. And maybe that is the quiet gift Taurus carries. The ability to build a life that is slow, steady, and sincere, starting with understanding themselves. No need to be perfect, just honest enough, gentle enough, patient enough to stay with the road they are already walking. If you are listening to these words right now, take them as a very soft reminder. You do not need to rush. You do not need to compare. You do not need to become the version others expect. You only need to keep moving forward at a pace that allows your heart to feel safe. And sometimes, that sense of safety is exactly where all the good things quietly begin.